Very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, following up on the Chairman's question, Dr. Schuckett, would it be fair to say, and this really yes or no would work here, would it be fair to say that the way we're going to be able to substantially reduce the time between when we identify a strain and developing the vaccine will be what Dr. Fauci is talking about, which is development of new platforms and ways to get the vaccine?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Dr. Fauci, I want to turn to you because over the years you've come and talked about the development of these vaccines. I remember when we had a hearing in this committee when we were trying to move from the egg to the cell vaccine. And now you say you've got the cell techniques, but you also say that you're getting ready to go into larger clinical trials on these new platforms. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Getty. The important point is that we really think that anything that needs to grow the virus and produce it just is a time sink. So that's the point that I made on that slide.
No, and we actually, even those of us who only took high school biology, understood that point. So good work again. What I want to know is, now that you've done your phase 1 trials and you're trying to move beyond that, what is your time frame for that?
Well, you know, it's going to really depend on, first of all, testing it in a season to show that even though you don't specifically have it against this particular strain, that it is covering that strain. So when you're trying to prove universality, you want to test it in a season in which it's a broader response.
So would that be like next season?
Well,
do you think?
we actually are going to try now in collaboration with BARDA to make enough of that new concept to be able to test it
in this season. Dr. Robinson, you're nodding your head yes.
Yeah, the following season.
Okay. So what can Congress do to help you with that? Do you need additional resources? What do you need to be able to start to expedite that research?
Well, I mean, obviously, you ask a scientist, do they need resources? The answer is an automatic knee-jerk.
Well,
of course, we can do better with more resources, but we actually need your continued support to keep the focus on the need for this, because when we do these tests, remember, we don't have control over the companies that make the contracts with the various health organizations that distribute this, but I think the focus that this committee has continually put on this has been very helpful to us.
Now, in your written testimony, you talk about the difference between seasonal flu and pandemic flu. Can you briefly explain that to us?
So I mentioned in my oral testimony a few moments ago that influenza viruses tend to change slightly. We call that a drift.
Right.
Right. That's a little bit. Now, if it changes slightly, even if you don't get the vaccine match right, there's enough background immunity in the community against similar viruses that the vast majority of the population are not going to have a catastrophic outbreak where people will be completely unprotected.
Right.
When you have an influenza that has what we call a shift, not a drift, that means major changes. So when you look at the general population, the overwhelming majority don't have any background protection. So it's almost as if you're totally naive to this new virus.
That's what happened in 2009,
Indeed.
2010.
The bad news that happened in 2009, the somewhat comforting news that it wasn't a particularly virulent virus.
And that's
so
what we were
were
worried
lucky.
about. So Dr. Robinson, now, you said in your testimony that there remain significant technical challenges before a substantially better influenza vaccine is available. And I would assume that the biggest concern for both of you gentlemen, or for all four of our witnesses, would be that if we don't develop that significantly better vaccine system and we get a virulent pandemic flu. Is that right, Dr. Robinson?
That's right. I mean, as Dr. Fauci pointed out, we actually have new ways to actually look at making these vaccines by looking at a different portion of one protein. We normally make the vaccines against the hemagglutinin, and then our immunity is to that, the head of that, and now we can actually look at the stalk, which we're making these candidates. We may be able a way there to protect against many different drifted strains and serve as a primer for a pandemic, so that you have one dose of this, so you only need one dose of pandemic vaccines instead of maybe two.
Yes, and so what we're concerned about, or what I'm concerned about, what keeps me awake at night, is if we don't do enough, both Congress and also our research institutions, to be able to have that vaccine available if we get a virulent pandemic flu. Dr. Fauci.
So another important point, besides the fact that all of the issues, the advantages of this universal flu vaccine, namely molecular biology rather than growing, the critical issue is if we get it right, you could actually stockpile it.
Right.
So we wouldn't have to worry about the chart that the chairman put up about it changing and try and keep up with it.
Right.
Because if you stockpile it, you could stockpile it the same way you stockpile polio vaccine, measles vaccine, et cetera. That's really the end game.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now recognize